Sure, Corey, how's that? We'll just test it, like now. Thanks, Corey. I really don't know what to say. It's super awkward. Carrie, how's Molly?
Molly is great.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. Oh, they're good. Oh, thanks, Corey. All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Committee of the Whole for Monday, March 11th, 2019. We have regrets this evening from Councillor Jay Brennan. Amendments to the agenda, I believe we have one, item K of the priority items. We are striking from the agenda. It's a duplicate to item E. Any other amendments? Hearing none, I'll call for disclosure of monetary interest. None this evening? Thank you. With that, I will move into item number 3, delegations. And to start, I will ask Mr. Vince Hamilton in attendance. Vince will be presenting a petition to Committee of the Whole. Vince, I would ask that you just make sure your mic is on. Yes. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair, Mr. Mayor, and councillors. My name is Vince Hamilton. I'm here today to present documents for hundreds of people, literally 2,607 people. I have simply been chosen to provide a service today for those residents, shoppers, and tourists. You, the council appear to have been looking for an identifiable group that does not exist, to show up here and to listen to you, provide information to which they are already privy. I do not represent any group organized to demonstrate, meet, or distribute petitions. The people in the audience, online and outside, are individuals with a common purpose and want their voices heard. No one wants to speak for them because no one represents any group. They are individuals. These individuals want a public forum, a real public forum, which you have consistently denied. This item A is a petition started online December 25th of 2017 by Patricia Pilo Headlam, with 433 names of people who voiced their opinion that they were in favor of option 1, angle parking. The petition stated clearly that anyone who lives, shops, or uses Smith Falls facilities were asked to sign. The deadline set was January 15, 2018. 433 signatures collected in 20 days was an impressive feat, and thank you from all of us, Patricia Pilo Headlam. This is item B, and this is another petition started online on February 16, 2019 by Patricia Pilo Headlam with so far and up to March 28, 2019, 628 signatures collected subsequent to this council's decision without public input to revisit and reverse last council's decision for option 1. This petition is very clear in its request for a public forum. There's item C. That's the hard copy continuation of the petition of item B, as immediately above, with so far 1,979 signatures. The total signatories of the petition online and hard copy from February 16th to March 8th, 2019 are 2,607, and clearly they request a public forum. It should also be noted that since the cutoff date, March the 8th, a mere 2 days ago, another 221 signatures have been collected and will be added to the total above figure at the next submission. You will note that these petitions indicate for the most part where the signatory lives, whether Smith Falls or outside of town. The petition also indicates for the most part as to whether they shop, work, volunteer, or use Smith Falls facilities. Please understand that the aforementioned is provided with the understanding that people from the surrounding area can, at minimum, be considered no less than tourists. We have heard a lot about attracting tourists/tourism to town and how advantageous it is to do so. Surely the residents who shop, work, volunteer, or use Smith Falls facilities on a daily basis can be valued no less. Should these out-of-towners or any of the signers be dismissed as invalid signatories, please do not campaign either to the residents or those in the surrounding area any need or desire to attract tourists in the future. It should at this time be made very clear that I certainly have been provided no indication that these petitions and further activities will not continue. As stated prior, I do not represent any group, and as I see it, they will continue to try and address their municipal government as each of them sees fit. They are just starting door-to-door canvassing. Now I'd like to now read the list of 35 businesses actually displaying petitions requesting a public meeting with special regard to the revisit of the resurfacing of Beckwith Street. Scott's Service Station, Gallery Hair Salon, Rito Lumber, Gerbos, Soul Space, Joanne and Sherry's, Union Street Bar and Grill, Gallery 15 Flea Market, Gemmo's Flowers, Hair Visions 2000, Reclaimed, Lori's Fringe Cuts, Precision Haircutters, Beautiful Full Figure, Arlie's Books, Country Diner, Century 21, Apollo Computers, Body FX, Ontario Vape, LCBO, Healy Bus, Pools 2000, Tom's Locksmithing, Ronabas Electrical, Schur's Auto Repair, Rexall Pharmacy, Mr. Gas on Lombard Street and Mr. Gas on Union Street, Rito Kitchen, Hank's Tires, Campbell's Trucking, Milano's Pizza, Catch and Ray's, and Leisure Days. It seems very apparent that the majority of businesses are not in favor of the revisit as claimed by this council. Mr. Mayor and councillors and Madam Chair, thank you very much for your indulgence, and I hereby submit these submissions for your perusal and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Our next delegate this evening is Mr. Justin DeHamel. Is Justin present? Good evening, Justin. I would ask that you just make sure the mic is on.
Hello? Yeah.
Perfect.
So I have to press it while I talk. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you directly today. I know that you guys are probably aware, you people are aware that I've been yelling outside with the megaphone for the last few council meetings. And I want you to hear directly from me why that is. First of all, I want to go over briefly my situation where I am. My family, they own the building at Russell and Beckwith on the west side, the corner there. And we have 9 apartments upstairs. Some of them are 2-bedroom apartments. And we have 0 parking capacity on our lot. So we rely completely on street level parking capacity in order to accommodate that. In addition to those apartments, we have multiple ground level commercial units that also rely heavily on that available parking capacity. And we're basically facing a crisis in the future with the Rito Hotel opening potentially with apartment units there, ground level retail there as well, increasing demand. And at the same time, we're looking at a dramatic decrease in supply with this new layout for the street that's been proposed this year. So I just wanted to share that as far as my rationale goes. But it goes beyond that. My opposition to this goes beyond that. I really truly feel that it was unfair that it wasn't brought up during the election, that this is a major milestone decision for the council, and it should have been addressed during the debate process during the election. I'm aware that it hasn't been, and there's a lot of people that feel very sore about that. We feel like we were basically led to believe that this was settled, and now we realize that it wasn't, and that's going to cause distress for us and our businesses down the road. I was out canvassing with Don Quinn last week, and one of the first places we stopped at was my neighbor at Subway, Harry, and he is an immigrant from India, and he's been there for over 5 years now, and he's a very hardworking man with a young family, and we went in to speak to him about his opinion on the change. And he really had a look on his face, when he first saw us come in, we're friends, I'm friends with him, and he had a smile, and, you could tell it's early in the morning, and he looks exhausted, and he's rushing to prepare for the midday rush. And he comes out, and we mentioned that we're there to talk about the parking. And literally you could see a shadow of despondency go over his face, this stress, this feeling that this business that he's invested in, his time, his family, all come over from India to work there. He's employing many people from the community as well. And he's facing the prospect of losing that essentially, because he said that if he faces a decline in his business, the franchise will yank it and he'll be out of there and he'll lose that revenue stream and that source of income. So that's very stressful for him. He seemed very disturbed by that on a deeply emotional level. And this is someone who's an immigrant to Canada, who's not necessarily going to put himself out there in the political process. A lot of these people aren't political people. A lot of the people we spoke to, the lady at the vacuum depot, the lady at the music store, there's so many examples, Bell World, so many examples of people that are just trying to do their jobs, just trying to fuel the economy, make the economy run, and we're being faced with now 2 summers worth of construction on Beckwith Street, and that's going to be compounded indefinitely with a serious reduction in the capacity for parking in Smiths Falls at the same time that we're anticipating a dramatic increase in economic activity and demand for services downtown. You're committing a planning malpractice, in my opinion, frankly, by so dramatically making a choice that so dramatically reduces the capacity for people to access our core and the businesses in the core. These are businesses that have been there for 30 years. In some cases, Iron Legends has been there. My family business has been there for almost 30 years. Some of the other stores that have signed this petition have been there for decades as well. These businesses, maybe they're old, maybe some of them are a little bit shabby, they've been through ups and downs, but these are the businesses that have been there durably through time and space, and we need to honor their opinion and the reality that downtown Smiths Falls isn't a retail center for over 100 years, well over 100 years. We're talking like almost 170 years, the economic activity that's been happening on Beckwith Street. It's no coincidence that that's been a prime location for retail, and it's because we have that flow of traffic and that easy access for people to turn in. And I recognize that there's arguments around, you know, different modes of transportation, different futures that transportation is going to bring to town. But the reality is that we're a rural community in a subarctic climate, and people are going to have to be owning their vehicles. They're going to have to be getting into town in vehicles, accessing service in those vehicles. Those vehicles aren't going to go and disappear into a tunnel while they're shopping. They're going to have to be parked somewhere, and they're going to have to be accessible when that person comes back an hour or two later when they're done purchasing services. So I'm just basically here to tell you, as the business community, we walked into these places, and they are instantaneously, without hesitation, without any kind of debate, telling us exactly what they think. And that's that angled parking provides the capacity for Smiths Falls that we need for the future growth. And all the businesses, the investors, the people that have dedicated their lives' work in downtown Smiths Falls, in some cases for decades, they feel this way. And I really believe that you need to hear it directly from me. And I am grateful for the opportunity to do it. But I really hope that for the sake of your legacies as councillors and as mayor, that you really consider and think about what we're telling you, because this problem is going to be compounded in the future, and people are going to be very angry. This has opened a cleavage in town. It's almost to the point where it's like a civil war in town. People are on one side or the other, and businesses are feeling threatened. I understand some of you have even felt a little bit threatened by this process, and I regret that deeply. But the reality is that businesses themselves are feeling fundamentally threatened economically, which is their only mode of survival. They feel threatened. And we need to honor that, and we need to respect that in this decision process, because these businesses are making long-term decisions. They made a long-term decision last year based on the previous council's choice, and we need to, in my opinion, respect that. And I believe that the only solution for that is to reverse the decision that was made this year and go back to an angled surface arrangement. That's my opinion, and that's the opinion of the business owners that we spoke to. And I'm here to relay that to you in a very respectful way. And I sincerely hope that you consider this, because these people are your constituents, they're your neighbors, these are people that you have to rub shoulders with everywhere you go, and we all have to be together as a community. And I really don't want to see this, you know, rip happen, and I want to see it come back together, and I think it can if we make a good positive choice. And that's what I'm asking you to do. And that's my representation. Thank you for the chance to make it.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Justin, can you just stay there 2 more seconds?
Sure.
Sorry, I'm late.
That's totally okay.
Justin, maybe I'll ask you to make sure your mic's off.
Oh.
Okay, we're going to keep going. Justin, feel free to stay there as long as you need. Item number 4 on the agenda is the adoption of minutes. We have none this evening due to the nature of the meeting. I'll move on to the CAO's and director's report, and given that our podium is utilized at the moment, I'll start with CAO Morris.
As luck would have it, I don't have any, but we do have a couple of others that do.
You want to tell a joke?
Well, yes, not a joke, but I will update committee on a recent effort to reconstitute the physician recruitment task force that existed and was developed many years ago. My understanding is the task force was formed to respond to a crisis of sorts in terms of a doctor shortage. We've done great work to overcome that crisis. The group has reassembled because we want to avoid a crisis, and so we're just getting our feet under us at this point. We have draft terms of reference. So once that's done, then I'll bring that back and recommend that a member of council be on that group. So right now I'm representing Smith Falls, but I think it would be advisable to have a member of council there.
Okay.
So
I remember this being part of the discussion when we were assigning committees earlier in the year. Yeah, did we not already assign a council rep? Councillor McGuire, you are our rep? Yeah. Okay.
okay, so knowing that, then once the terms of reference are available, I'll loop Councillor McGuire in, and we'll have a seat at the table. Thank you.
All right, moving on, Director Manhire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Council, just 3 quick updates. It is March break. We had our first day of activities today. There are 5 days of activities happening, and people are interested. There are posters up all over town, but there's also on our website and Facebook and on our communication pieces in the paper as well. The Bears are in the playoffs for the first time in a number of years, so get your tickets now. We'll see how far they go. It's been a few changes to our scheduling in order to accommodate them, but we've had very good cooperation with the groups. And then just wanted to let council know as well that I will get a draft of the building condition assessment report hopefully by the end of this week. We will be reviewing it, provide feedback to the consultant, and then we will bring that back to council, and we're scheduling that for the end of March.
Thank you. Sorry, hearing no questions. Yep, Director Costello, you had a report as well.
Thank you. Just one quick report. As council is aware, we have some vacancies on our boards and committees, and I'd just like to put a little shout out that we are accepting applications. The application can be found on our website for the Child Development Center Advisory Board, the Airport Museum, Heritage House Museum Advisory Board, the Municipal Heritage Committee, Property Standards Committee, Recreation Hall of Fame, Smith Falls Drug Strategy, and the Planning Advisory Committee. So those applications, if anybody's interested, are due at the clerk's office by March 29th, 2019. And again, they're on our website, or they can call Deputy Clerk Bennett or myself, and we'll ensure they'll get a copy. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Any comments or questions from council? Hearing none. We'll move on to correspondence items. We received a notice from Ontario Energy Board regarding gas rate increases. This is mostly just for information, but for the public's knowledge, it's helpful to know that the rate increase is effective April 1st, 2019. On the average residential annual bill, the increase will be 93.93. And other customers, including small businesses, would also be affected. There are appeal rights and participation rights for a public hearing that OEB will be holding. Does council have any questions? There's no action coming out of this for us. No? Okay. Moving into priority items. Sorry, I'm flipping between my agenda. Sorry, in-camera issues, we have none this evening. Moving into the priority items, we're starting with the Seniors Committee. So I had the pleasure this weekend of meeting with Christine, and she's here. There she is in the back. And Ken is usually here as well. There's Ken. At the library to discuss what the mandate and function of a seniors committee would be for the town of Smith Falls. Christine and Ken brought this forward as a delegation a couple weeks ago, and then reached out again to myself and to Councillor Brennan to discuss whether or not there was an appetite to revisit this. So having discussed kind of what a committee would look like with Christine and Ken, I think the real value of the committee could be as an an umbrella group to provide networking and information sharing between all of the organizations that already exist within the committee. There's certainly recognition that there are a lot of groups and coordinators within the community that are already offering services to seniors, but there seems to be a lack of knowledge about what those services are or how seniors could access them. Christine also had some interesting ideas about a check-in program, particularly in light of what happened to the senior in East Ottawa last week who had been living unattended for several weeks after the snow. The police actually had to dig him out and he was surviving on canned goods. So things like that do happen, and it really demonstrates why there needs to be a network for seniors to rely on. And as a municipality, we are well positioned to do that. We are also thinking that there could be real value to use this committee as an information channel between the municipality and seniors. And in particular, we heard on Thursday night at the strategic planning session that older residents of town feel a little left out of the communications channels that the municipality is currently using because they are so digital. So having a committee like this that could be a conduit for that information could be helpful to us. Really, I think this becomes more of a working group than an advisory committee. It's more about the doers rather than the dreamers, and making meaningful and direct impacts in the lives of seniors in the community. We did have a brief discussion about the terms of reference. Ken had been kind enough to prepare a draft terms of reference based on some other models that communities are using around the province, but it was very tailored to being an advisory group to policy rather than actually implementing change within the community. So I think that it warrants some tailoring, and we're hoping to submit that in draft form probably to Carrie for review, and then perhaps assigning it to an applicable staff resource as well before it comes back to council. But tonight the real purpose is to make sure that there's consensus amongst council about what the mandate of this committee could be, or what your expectations would be, or even if there's just no interest in doing it at all before we spend too many more hours working on the project. Councillor Allen?
Yes, I had spoken to Christine and Sweater Gang, and I know that organization. I know the good work they do. The other thing that struck me at our strategic planning evening was a gentleman at the back who stood up close to the end of the evening and just said, I'm a senior and I want to be included in what's going on, but I think it's the one you were referring to. And it kind of haunted me that day, and I thought about it, and I was trying in my own mind to think, how do we do that? You know, like my own father's that way. He doesn't have any electronics. He counts on his wife to tell him, but he often doesn't know what's going on. And I know that Cogeco does their very best, but I don't know. I've tried for the last 8 years to find out what the usership is in Cogeco, and nobody seems to know, you know, who has it. So I think from strictly a communication of what's out there, it would be really a good thing to have. I'd be interested to know how it's going to work, because I know I talked to Councillor McKenna, and there are a lot of agencies already doing a lot of services. So how they would all come together and help one another, I don't know. But I do think that we have a large population of seniors, and many of them, like you have implied, are alone or don't have a lot of family that are checking in on them. So I think it's certainly worth looking into. That's my thought.
Councillor Alford?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only thing I would say is would there be a mechanism by which you could bring together all of the people who are involved in seniors' issues and let them come up with an idea for, is it umbrella or advisory, or what? I'm not sure what's needed.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point, and I think that came out when the three of us were sitting to discuss on Saturday. You know, we recognize that there are a large number of organizations that already exist, but we don't know where their capacity is focused, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but we also don't want to move in a direction where there's no interest in moving or capacity to actually fulfill that mandate. So our hope at this level is to keep the purpose and mandate of the committee as general as possible, to solicit membership, and then to reevaluate what the project deliverables at the end of the day could be. I think really it's about getting the word out there that the municipality is interested in facilitating this as a group, and then seeing who comes to the table or who has an interest in participating. That was kind of my thought, at least. Councillor McKenna?
I'm always interested in more and better, accurate information for seniors and for all of the residents. Having said that, what's interesting to me is we jump to the solution first, which is let's set up a committee. When we really, I believe, we want to unpack the problem. What is it we're trying to fix? And I think it could be many of the things that you've identified and that, and your colleagues, when you met with them, identified. They may actually be there, and the town could facilitate a conversation and then come up with a solution or solutions. And it may be a committee of town, or it may be an umbrella group, as Councillor Alford suggests. So I just, in healthcare in particular, we jump to solutions too quickly. Problems are complex. I think what we're trying to do is we're getting a lot of anecdotal information about how isolated seniors are, and no doubt there are some. But I think having a conversation with some of the partners, and I think the town is very well situated to facilitate that conversation. Out of that could very well come a need for this type of a committee. I know that the United Way of Lanark County has just released a seniors report. I've read it. It's excellent. It goes a long way in identifying some of the issues. It doesn't pin it down to just Smiths Falls, though it covers the whole county. And so anyways, I would rather understand the problem we're trying to fix better before we go to a solution. And if I could help with bringing that conversation together and having more of it, I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Sorry, I'll go to Mayor Pankow first.
Yeah, and basically just supporting Councillor McKenna's comments, and I think there's a lot of value in continuing on a fact-finding mission at this stage. And as mentioned, there are a lot of community partners out there who are providing services, and this is the largest segment, or has been the largest growing segment of our population, and we know that there are probably gaps, but we don't know what those gaps necessarily are today. So I agree there's value in keeping the conversation going. I'm not sure what the end result will be, but I think we need to carry it further.
Okay. Councillor McGuire?
Thanks. I know from the committees I sit on, we get great support from staff, but there's time associated with that, therefore a budgetary implication from it. Do we know what kind of a cost would be associated with making this a committee of council versus an umbrella group versus something else?
No, probably not. I think the front end of the development of a group like this is always more administratively heavy. It's going to take time to develop a terms of reference, advertise for membership, solicit those members, establish the group unto itself. I think on an ongoing basis, you're probably realistically looking at maybe monthly meetings. But we all know how long meetings can go. So what it would look like for a staff resource, I'm thinking one person dedicated to helping assist in a meeting once a month for, say, 2.5 hours. I don't think it has to be hugely intensive, but you're right, there is a cost to that. So it's about whether or not we as council see that as a priority that we would like to have staff assist with. I understand what Councillor McKenna is saying about unpacking the problem, and perhaps the committee is more of a solution than a mechanism to evaluate the issues at play right now. I'm just wondering, in your experience, Councillor McKenna, how you actually go about unpacking the problem, because I would think that there would be a core group of people, ideally a committee or a working group, who does that, but perhaps I'm off base.
No, that's exactly it. It can be as simple, and I think the town and Ken and his colleague actually inviting to a roundtable discussion is a great place to start. There's, Community Home Support Lanark County who has this mandate. The Southeast Lynn has the mandate to provide senior services. Our local hospital. There's volunteer seniors groups. There's seniors activity centers. Bringing a group around the table and say, what is not getting done, and is it communication, and how would the town of Smiths Falls, or how could we help seniors in our community fill any gaps that have been identified? And are we the best people to do it? Oh, we are? Okay, great. If nobody else can do it, or nobody else has that mandate and the funding already, then absolutely maybe it is time to step in. But if it's already being done and people just don't know about it, then maybe our role is simply communications. But I don't know. I would encourage that roundtable discussion with Ken and colleagues and anybody else interested, and have a facilitated conversation, identify what the issues are, then say, okay, what's the solution?
Okay. Okay. Councillor Alfred, did you have further points?
No, I think Councillor McKenna has kind of coalesced for me too, that I think if there were a roundtable discussion and all the people who have an interest or in that are already providing services for seniors, if they could all get together at one table and find out what it is that the municipality could do, or is it where are the gaps? What would we be doing?
Okay.
I think a roundtable might be the solution for that, to identify if indeed there are gaps, where the gaps are, or maybe it's just to bring all of those people together in one place where they can have the conversations and see what happens from those conversations.
Thank you. I think those are both good points, and I think it kind of highlights what the purpose in our mind the committee was going to do, and just breaks that out into something less formal as a roundtable. So we'll back up, and I'll have a discussion again with Ken and Christine and talk about facilitating a roundtable. And then as the informal council resource, I'll report back to you about where that goes. Sorry, I'm so unused to keeping my mic on. Okay, so hearing no further discussion on that, we'll move into item B, being the Town Hall renovations Phase 2, and I invite Director Manhire to the podium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what we're looking for here is direction on the plan for the phasing of the Town Hall renovations. We have been, just as a background piece, Phase 1 was the Welcome Center, which is the tourism and economic development area where our tourism and AcDev folks are housed, as well as the Chamber and DBA offices. The next phase is scheduled to be the center phase, which is our service area, and we've done some preliminary work in terms of meeting with stakeholders as well as the design group to see what we needed. We had come back to council with a couple of options before, but since then we've had discussions with fire around space requirements for fire, and it looks like having council chambers downstairs is really not a viable option with the space that we have available. So we've, with that information and with the basic design that I've included as part of this report, what I'm looking for tonight from council is kind of direction on the phasing of the project. So we have that center phase done or completed. It's a carryover from 2018 in terms of the budget item. We also have the possibility of doing the building services area, which is the area that's in behind the Welcome Center and the economic development area, as a separate service, and we can fund that with the building reserve fund that we have. So that takes out, we don't have final cost estimates on it, but it takes about $350,000 out of the plan initially to do that area, and funds it through that project. As I indicated, what we're looking for is strictly the phasing now. It's not where all the walls are and where the doors are. We're strictly looking at the idea of having the architects develop the plans and then develop the tender document that would go out to a public process. And we would like to get that done this spring so that we can have the work done over this spring, summer, and fall. We anticipate the project would take anywhere between 5 and 6 months to complete. And we're going to need approximately 2 months to at least 3 months probably to head into the process. So that would leave for a third phase of the project to be the component that would include council chambers and the administrative offices downstairs as as that third phase, which would complete the building component of the town hall renovation. Bearing in mind as well that we have a component of the outdoor town square piece built into this year's budget as well.
Thank you, Director Manhire. Starting with Councillor Allen.
Yes, the tour that we had, Director Manhire, of the fire hall, and we talked to the fire chief as well as we were doing it. I mean, I certainly agree that it's something that needs to be dealt with sooner rather than later. The question I have for you is in regards to, we did discuss, and I think the reason we looked at the council chamber moving was the deadline for accessibility and how important it is for accessibility for a council chamber. So what, I know you're putting it off, but have you in your mind a thought of how we would make this floor accessible?
Next year, and with a lift.
With a lift?
Yes. That's part of the concept plan right now. So the way we go through this is we identify the spaces required for operational needs, the relationships for operational needs. So that's why we have in the building services area, for instance, we have planning, CBO, engineering, all in one area, so that as people come in for building permits or whatever else, that they have access to all of the people and the services that they would require, all within that area. So it's the relationship piece. So that's what we start with. Then from there, we identify the square footage requirements for each of those service areas, and what that would look like, how many of them, where they need to be, all that kind of thing. So right now, we've got a fairly good idea of what phase 2 looks like. We don't have as good an idea of what phase 3 looks like because we're not at that stage of development yet. But once we have direction from council, then we would start developing those components.
Thank you. Councillor McKenna?
Thank you, Director Manner. I'm supportive of the staff's recommendation to approve the schematic and the proposed scope for phase 2. I did have a question. Right after the options on the report, you go into budget and financial implications, and it says there's 1.5 million, 339 for phase 2. So it was the scope of the work that I was interested in: planning, building, and engineering. So the planning, that would be the architect, and the design, like detailed design work. The planning, would that be?
No, the phase, I'm sorry, I'm not, the planning piece, and this may be just some confusion in my terminology.
Okay.
The planning area is the area currently where our finance department and engineering is, and behind the welcome area. What we're looking for at this point in terms of action forward is to have the design, the architectural plans drawn up for the phase 2 piece, which would include that area.
Yeah, I misread it. That was the planning, and the building would be covered in, but it's those departments that would be covered.
Yes.
Got it.
Sorry.
And if that estimate of 300,000, that's about 20% of the overall budget, the 300,000 piece is estimated, or is that just
300,000 would be in addition?
Just for that department?
It would be in addition to that, and that would be the piece that would be funded, or that we're proposing to fund out of the building reserve.
Great, thank you.
And that estimate is based strictly on square footage at this point, until we have a more concrete design.
Councillor Alfred?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Director Marnhart, I'm not adverse to supporting the recommendation, but what is the plan for the fire? It's not in either phase 1, 2, or 3 on the schematic here. It's grayed out, which says area not included in phase 2 or 3.
That's just for the 3-bay area.
That's the trucks.
So
That's just the trucks.
Yes.
that's just where the trucks are.
So the rest of the space for the fire department is included in,
That's correct. Training
Okay.
spaces, offices, there's an expansion of the communications center, there's a training area, so that all gets incorporated as part of phase 2.
because certainly when we took the tour of that space, it was very apparent there needed to be some
Right, and so
work done there.
we determined that we could accommodate a number of their needs through renovation of this rather than building a $5 million fire hall.
Thank you.
Mayor Panko.
Actually, my question is really primarily to the fire hall as well. So are we confident that with this design, it will meet not just current needs, but the needs going forward? I mean, expanded training space and the cleaning rooms and turnout gear and all that stuff, but when it comes to the actual bays, we're confident that that will meet current needs, or I guess if necessary, we could expand onto the existing 3-bay?
That's certainly our option is that we want to divert this for a minimum of 15 years.
Okay.
And that, of course, also builds in capacity for us to expand in our services potentially. So the fire chief is comfortable with this plan, providing him the space that he needs. That's part of the consultations that we do.
Okay. And with the current level of costing and carry over from last year, $1.5 million, roughly this year, there's a little bit of borrowing with the $1.5 million, is that correct?
There
In
is.
the budget? How much
Yeah.
would?
900,000.
Okay. And once we're tender, I guess we'll firm prices and.
That's
how
correct.
we will proceed.
Yeah, what we'll do is we give them the design parameters and the concept which we've got from that first phase. We then work with them around what our envelope is, what our needs are within that envelope, and then that's how they proceed with the design components.
And can you just, I guess, reiterate the merit or benefits, I guess, of, because at one time we were looking at a five-phased approach to this whole redevelopment. Now we're bringing it down to 3.
Right.
And
So one of them is the opportunity piece where we didn't have the building reserve funding that we do have available to us now. So that makes it faster, and then we can complete phase 3 potentially next year, depending on our timing for this phase, because we do planning while we're doing the next project, so they do overlap. But that gets us further ahead. And then from a logistical component, the idea of doing this side of the building, so the old school side that houses council chambers and administrative offices, makes sense to do that at once. We're putting a lift in, which will impact both areas. We're already moving the service area out of the administration area down here. So it gives us that step process that makes sense economically as well as from a logistical perspective.
And just so no one misunderstanding, because the building reserve is the amount of money we've collected in building permit fees that have built up that account. And of course, we can use that to help cover some of the cost of renovation. So that's a benefit of having, I guess, the fee revenue we've experienced over the last couple of years.
That's correct. The initial plan was to have that out of capitals in other areas, so that does free up those funds to be used for other capital projects. And we will, once we have the asset management plan, I'm sure we'll have no shortage of projects to spend that money on.
Well, I think we would all concur the need to ensure better access to these chambers as quickly as possible, so we look forward to that for next year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Panko. Councillor Alfred.
Just one more. While it pains me to have to put off accessible, being the top floor being more accessible, it is, I think, the right thing to our customer service areas and to look after our residents, and the fire hall are more important than the people who are only here once a week. So I as much as it pains me to push it off, I think your recommendation is the right one at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Alfred. Councillor McKenna.
This is either for you, Director Manor, or CEO Morris, but this would be the largest of the 3 phases. This looks
That's
like
correct.
the most complicated and most and largest of the 3. And the first phase, it was a relatively straightforward renovation of that ground floor, and it turned out beautifully. With this one, would the architect act as the project manager on our behalf, or how would we oversee the oversight of the entire project?
We haven't confirmed it yet, but the proposal at this point is to have the architect do the design and prepare the tender so that it can go out. At the same time, we would advertise for a project manager that we would hire and have that person on hand for when the tenders come in so they could do the evaluation of those tenders. Part of, and through the chair, one of the challenges is we don't talk about our favorite children because we don't have any. We have all of our favorites, and it's just a question of what we can handle at this time and what we need to do next year just from a capacity perspective, financial and staff resource. And one of the issues here is that we do need somebody who's kind of on the verge of being able to handle that project. So we determined that a project manager to go through that process is the best use of resources for this project.
Start to finish.
Start to finish.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Manhire, I just have a couple questions. One, when you say temporary lift, when you say lift will be added next year, do you mean a full elevator, or do you mean like an accessibility stair lift which will be replaced by an elevator?
Not a stair lift, but there's a lift is a hydraulic piece that we can put in that will bring a person and a wheelchair up rather than an elevated device, which is a closed-in box with...
This is more the open shaft style.
Similar, yes.
Okay.
It's a much cheaper option than a full lift, a full elevator in there.
So there's no proposal long-term to put an elevator in. It will simply be a lift?
Yes. With this,
at this point?
With the scope, we actually looked at a few different options, but we try to keep it affordable and practical for us. Instead of having to build, because we would have to build two and then potentially build one and build a catwalk and put a second level on. So it got to be a lot more involved than we really wanted to be. But the idea would be that we could get people in and out of this space so that they could have access to the public space.
Noted. Are you foreseeing any costs associated with temporarily housing our staff while we coordinate the construction?
Not at this point, but the full plan will be developed as we develop the tender and the plan.
Okay. The other question I have is related to the use of the building department's reserve. Have we consulted with our auditor about the use of that reserve for this function? Because that reserve is audited on an annual basis, and I'm getting kind of the heebie-jeebies from thinking that we're using the reserve for a resource that the auditors are not going to sanction in the end.
Yeah, thanks for the question, and my comment is for clarity, the notion of using that reserve fund is just that, it's just a notion. We will bring back a report as soon as the 25th of March to have a discussion and recommend a strategy for using that. We have consulted with our auditor, and so we'll bring back a fulsome dialogue or debate on the use of those funds. So we're earmarking it at this point for the purposes of moving forward with the tender, but clearly council needs to make some decisions on how we spend that money.
Okay, noted. Director Manhire, the last question I had is, I have a fond affinity for the tin ceiling in 2 Bay. Can you comment on the likelihood of it still being visible post-reno?
Part of the concept, the building concept with the renovation of Town Hall was to protect the heritage integrity of the building. So we have no desire to destroy that. And if we can build that component in, we will certainly do that.
I'm so proud to hear you say that. Okay, that concludes all my questions. Does anyone else on council have any other questions or comments? No. To summarize then, I think that you have support from council to move forward as you've recommended for phase 2 of the work to include the areas highlighted in blue on the attached schedule, but they could be summarized to include central reception and the welcome area, all of the fire department with the exception of 3 Bay, and then the building, planning, and engineering services that are currently located behind the Welcome Center in the old schoolhouse. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on. If I can get back to my agenda. Item C on the agenda is 2019 Court Security and Prisoner Transportation Program, and I don't believe there was a written report for this, so I'll turn the floor over to Mayor Pankow.
Yes, thank you. So this is an annual grant, goes to our police service, and we're pleased to, the Ministry of Community Safety and Correctional Services is pleased to inform that they will be proceeding with the Court Security Prisoner Transport Program for 2019. $125 million going out to assist municipalities in offsetting their CSPT costs. Our allocation is $8,618.88. So we simply need to go into an agreement, pass a bylaw to go into an agreement with the province to receive that funding.
Perfect. Does council have any questions? No, I see nodding heads. We will bring forward the bylaw at the next meeting. Yeah, next week. Perfect. Deputy Clerk Bennett. Item B, the drinking water system summary report. And I'll call to the mic Sarah Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here to present to you the findings of the 2018 Drinking Water Summary Report. The purpose of the attached report is to satisfy the legislative requirements of Schedule 22 in OREG 170-03 and to update Mayor and Council, the CAO, the Operating Authority regarding the water treatment plant. So I'll just go through a brief overview. I will not read every 200 pages of it. So the report must be received by council no later than March 31st of every year. The report must list the requirements of the Safe Drinking Water Act, the regulations, and the system's approval. Any orders from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation, and Parks that the system failed to meet at any time during the period covered by the report, and specify the duration of the failure and describe the measures that were taken to correct them. Summary of quantities and flows of the water supplied during the period covered, including monthly averages, maximum daily flows, and daily instantaneous peak flows, and a comparison of a summary of the quantities and flow rates of the systems and any other information. So Section 1 of the report is just an overview of the drinking water system. Section 2 is the legislative requirements of the report, and more details can be found in Appendix B. Section 3 is the non-compliance section. So this section outlines any non-compliances received by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation, and Parks. This year's inspection for the 2018-2019 inspection was conducted on January 15th and January 16th. We haven't received the findings of that report as of yet. The inspector is still going over that inspection period, so when that information is received, we will bring it back to council. I will review briefly the 2017-2018 inspection. It was received April 30th of 2018. There was 4 non-compliances noted in that inspection, which I won't go into detail, they are listed there. We did provide an action plan on June 29th, and she did accept the action plan that we provided. And we did receive 97.16% for that inspection year. And even though there was some non-compliances noted, there was the quality of water and the safety to the water remained in compliance at all times. Section 4 just goes over the quantities of flows for the raw water and finished water and compared to our permit to take water and our drinking water works permit. Section 5 is the annual report, and this report has to be prepared by February 28th and made available free to the public. It was posted to the town's website February 11th, and as Director Dunlop reported at an earlier meeting, it was provided to the Township of Montague because we do provide them Adirona with a portion of water. Section 6 just goes over the drinking water quality management standard, the licenses and the permits. We didn't have an on-site audit last year. We will probably be due this year for an on-site audit from our third-party auditor. And Section 7 just briefly goes over source water. So I'll take any questions if there are any.
Councillor McKenna?
Thank you very much for all the work into this very large and very important document, and I appreciate all the efforts that go into it. This is around the non-compliance. Obviously, that's a focus of my attention. One of the things on the orientation tour for new council, it stuck in my head that there was I'm not sure if it wasn't non-compliance, but there was an issue raised by the ministry perhaps when they were at our facility about the diesel line that ran to operate the generators. So the tanks there and the generators there. It didn't show up as non-compliant, but it was something that they flagged. It's not related perhaps to the safety of the water immediately. Can you just let me know where that is at?
Yeah, Chair, Mayor, we're currently working on a process to replace those lines. That was an order that was provided to us by TSSA. It wasn't through the ministry or an inspection. That was another inspection to change fuel suppliers at the time. And it is now part of our license that on a yearly basis, our system needs to be inspected and must meet all the requirements of TSSA when they change the standards. So there will be a report forthcoming probably to council to go over the associated costs with those replacements.
Thank you. I knew you wouldn't have forgotten about it.
Any other questions? Councillor Alfred?
Not a question, just an observation and an admission that I have not read the nearly 300 pages as of yet, but I will try to do that this weekend.
Thank you, Councillor Alfred. Sarah, can I ask, did we have any activity around source water protection in the last year? Did we have any RMO reviews, or because we are offering those services in-house, correct? The RMO services?
No, they're through the Conservation Authority. They're contracted out to the RVCA.
Okay, and did we make use of those services within the last year?
I don't believe so. I think there was a few that were reviewed, but there was nothing that came about through the review. And they didn't flag anything that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I'm not sure if, Troy, if you have anything further.
Sure, Madam Chair. We did actually, we didn't directly engage our risk management official. The applications that were reviewed in our source water area actually were cited in Montague and another one in Rideau Lakes. So we leaned on those municipalities through their agreements to have those two development applications reviewed, and in both cases they come up clear. So the process is working.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Glad to hear it.
Great.
Hearing no other questions or comments, we'll move on. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
And I call to the podium Director Costello to talk about the 2018 building report.
Two annual reports tonight. So this is the 2018 annual building permit fee report. This comes before council every year to give you an indication on what our building department has been at for the last 12 months. So in accordance with the Act, the building permit fees are set to cover all costs associated with servicing building permits and enforcing the Act and Code. So in Schedule A, which you'll find as part of this document, it outlines for the last 4 years the construction value that we've obtained from different permits that have been submitted to the town, as well as the permit fees that we've taken in. So for 2018, we had 110 permits filed, with the construction value at over $165 million, with the permit fees at just over $2 million. Now, if you add the demolition fees into that, it's at $172,635,647. This is brought before council on an annual basis. Now that we've also recruited a full-time chief building official, the hope is that we'll have quarterly reports to bring forward to council for your review. And as CIO Morris indicated, a report will be brought forward regarding the building reserve in the upcoming committee of the whole. I'm not sure which one at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Yes, just a quick question, Director Costello. Over the last long while, we've, in our neighborhoods where we have heritage buildings, we often have owners of them, especially if they're developers that are trying to restore the building, struggling with meeting the new code and having it not sympathetic to the original building.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just wondering, with so much development now in all of our historic areas of town, if perhaps that's not something we need to be looking at, especially given that we have our own building inspector as well. I know some communities have, it's not forgiveness, but it's a process whereby if you buy a Victorian house that had a veranda, you can reinstate the veranda to the measurement that it was in its original form.
No, that's a great point, and actually maybe an idea for an upcoming Municipal Heritage Committee would be to have our CBO come and make a delegation. I think that's a great idea.
We've talked about that.
Oh, there you go.
The Municipal Heritage Committee. Okay.
That's a great idea.
I just wondered if it had been talked about at this end. But
no, but it certainly will be now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Alfred.
Director Costello, if you could just remind everybody, 172 million sounds like an extreme amount of money,
yes,
and as the permit fees that we collect too. But could you refresh our memories on the disposition of that kind of money?
Sure. Well, 2018 was a busy year. So we've had major projects in 2018, and they're outlined in your report. The majority of that being Tweed, the renovations to T.R. Leger and St. James School, which is now the new St. Francis School, as well as the new chiropractic office on Ferreira Drive, and some of the new dwellings in Parkview Homes. And if you would like me to go back, I can delve a little deeper for the bigger projects to get permit fees, specifically per project, if you'd like, Councillor Alfred.
I don't think that's necessary,
Okay.
but just as an overview of it, now that we've collected that money,
Mm-hmm.
what can that money be used for?
A good point, and we'll probably delve into that with the reserve report coming forward as well.
Okay,
Thank you.
Any other questions? Carrie, the astronomical value of the reserve is staggering.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing that we've ever seen before. I'm wondering if, and this is probably actually more of a question for Janet, but was it flagged in the audit that our reserve has inflated so dramatically, so quickly, that there's a threat that there would be a need to reduce the rest of our building fees to balance that out? I mean, the whole point of the annual reporting is to ensure that we're maintaining fees appropriate to the cost of operating and administering the service. So has the auditor flagged this?
Thank you, through the chair. I have had in-depth conversations with her. She knows that this is going to be an anomaly, maybe a few years, and then that will cease. There's been ongoing discussions on target balances of that reserve, what potential capital uses can be used. And this, again, will come forward in a report, even going back over historical, where we landed at a deficit, say, for the last 5 years. That could potentially be drawn from that reserve. The building code is very generic, other than, well, you and I have discussed that. It's very generic that, but again, it has to be justifiable that it's related to the building. So when that has been suggested, it may well be when I, say to her, if we're going to use that for the building department, it'll be based on square footage, but then a portion of the mechanical, which is a good portion of what the customer service area. So potentially even more could be used from that. So, but no, she is not in any shape or form, because she knows this is not going to be a consistent year after year.
Okay.
But again, I've also done research. I think I have about 12 different municipalities that I've kind of taken what they're using. There is no
Standard?
No, one
No,
size fits all.
No, and I mean, the nature of my question was really that concern that if Carolyn identifies this as kind of the anomaly, then that protects us from reducing our rates only to be in a deficit in future years. Because, I mean, notably, our single detached dwellings, like our new builds per annum are 18 units a year. I mean, that's nowhere close to meaningful growth increases to sustain what we need.
If I could just reiterate on Councillor Alford's question, I think it was close to 90% was Tweed related.
Yeah.
So that's what you're getting, and they're substantial, obviously, at that kind of building.
Okay, perfect. So if there are no other questions, then we will receive the report at the next council meeting. So next week?
Can I just make one small amendment?
Sure can.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a small amendment to bring it to your attention. Under budget and financial implications, the final number in that paragraph should actually be $2,516,774.76. Treasurer Koziel brought that to my attention this morning. So in the report that's brought forward for council to receive, it'll have that small amendment made to it.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next item for discussion is the Great Trails, Trans-Canada Trail Council representation. So this is coming forward further to correspondence that we received a couple meetings ago. And I was surprised, as I'm sure some of you were, that our community was not identified on the list of participating communities. So my recollection from reading this letter, and I haven't read it since we originally received it, was simply that we would pass a resolution naming ourselves as a TCT champion community if it was something that we were interested in participating in. So yes, I see nodding heads. We will bring that forward. Okay, excellent. So Deputy Clerk Bennett can prepare some draft wording for inclusion in the next meeting. Moving on, Otis Site Plan Amendment Report. This is for the property out on Lombard Street where the liquor store is located. And I'll turn the mic over to Councillor Grenke. Mr. Grenke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone.
Oh, I'll turn that on. So I'm bringing forward a report and a recommendation with respect to a site plan amendment that's been received by the town. And this, the effect of this is essentially to fill in a long-anticipated commercial area in the town on Lombard Street. It's close to Tim Hortons. It's an extension of the Dollarama and LCBO Plaza. So there's been some history here, and just to briefly summarize that, in 2007, Council approved a site plan agreement with Philip Otis, the owner at the time, to construct in 3 phases of commercial development at that location. So around that time, an access road was constructed that provided direct access to that site with 2 entrances. In 2013, Council approved an amendment to that site plan, accommodating some revisions to the building plan, and that's fairly similar to what we have here right now. So that revision included one shopping plaza built parallel to the access road, and then a drive-through restaurant closer to the corner of the access road and Lombard Street. And then Phase 3, that site plan agreement spelled out a timeline by which the development had to be completed, and market conditions did not trigger that construction. So now here we are. The proponents are back and are looking to proceed with the completion of that. So what's being proposed right now is an addition to the existing plaza building, so roughly 815 square meters, or just under 9,000 square feet in size for 5 commercial units, and then also the restaurant at the corner, about 205 square meters, so about 2,200 square feet with the drive-in.
So the access to the site won't change. They'll continue to use the built out access road and the two accesses that they have there right now. However, through the site plan process, we worked with what was previously provided, and also reviewed with Public Works, Ministry of Transportation, RVCA, and the fire department to identify whether there's any significant changes from their parameters. So site plan control, of course, is that planning tool that provides for a more detailed examination of design details in a matter that's a little more specific than we normally accommodate through zoning. And of course, it is a multidisciplinary exercise that involves the consultation with other agencies. So the site the development does comply with the existing zoning, but just a couple of highlights here that are part of the site plan approval. So they are looking at installing some bike racks at the restaurant. We're also looking at some enhanced pedestrian access and a number of crosswalks through the parking lot. Of course, the challenge we have on Lombard Street is it's not the most pedestrian engaging landscape, so certainly the access to and from for alternative modes of transportation is not stellar. However, there is an opportunity here which the town was able to work out with the proponents to create some pedestrian circulation through the property. So the overall design is going to be very similar to what we have there right now. It's going to extend out towards Lombard Street with a similar color profile. There won't be the green that we have for Dollarama, but it'll be the more similar gray and beige. There's a landscaping plan was also proposed that outlines the planting of a number of trees around the periphery, which will certainly enhance the viewscape in time. The proponents are also proposing to widen the rear access along Ferguson Drive just to improve traffic circulation and emergency vehicle access, and some new speed bumps that are being proposed as well. So the site plan agreement, if approved by council, will include the detailed design schedules that have gone through the level of review. I will note the elevation drawing for the plaza is included within the suite of designs, and that's intended to enable construction to occur on that plaza very quickly. So the site design details for everything else have been addressed. The only thing they have not provided yet are the elevation drawings for the restaurant, the future Starbucks that would be going in there. So the overall site plan is prepared, but it's simply the overall layout of the restaurant facade. So what I'm proposing is that council approves the site plan amendment as provided, and then when that facade is provided in the future, that we simply, at the staff level, if acceptable, we approve a red line revision and add that to the file. Alternatively, if council prefers, we can undertake a smaller amendment in the future to add that facade change.
All right, thank you, Mr. Grenke. Councillor Allen's hand shot up first.
Yes, no, this was of great interest to me, because I remember 8 years ago when this started, this whole process. But my question is in regards to, is that all of the Otis property now then?
No, the property does, through the chair, the property does extend further back in the direction of Ferreira Drive. However, this is the only part of the property that I'm aware of that has that development tagged and reserved. I'm not aware of any plans for the rear end.
And do we have a timeline of when that would be built?
The rear portion that hasn't...
No, what's being proposed?
Well, they're hoping to start construction this spring on the commercial addition. That's before council this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Alfred.
Just one comment, because it actually started before Councillor Allen. It started in 2006 when I was leaving council. We had already undertaken these discussions. So very exciting for me to finally see this project come to fruition and not have that rather unpleasant long grass at the entrance of to our town. So I'm excited, and I have seen this before at Planning Advisory at the committee there. Thank you, Carl.
Councillor Alfred, perhaps on that note, you could provide a summary of the comments from Planning Advisory Committee, because I noted they weren't included in the report. Was there any substantial dialogue at PAC?
There was, but Mr. Granke has captured it all. We had concerns about the softscape out near the road and what that would look like, and plantings, and how the entrance would go into the drive-through restaurant, but all of those have been addressed and under the leadership of John Wanless at the Planning Advisory level. There's not too much he doesn't know.
No, there isn't.
There isn't.
There really isn't.
So, no, Mr. Granke's captured everything we commented on.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Good.
Mr. Granke, I've got just a couple. The parking, they did not need a minor variance for that? They have sufficient parking on the site?
They do, yes.
They do have sufficient parking?
Yes, I think they have a couple of, there's slightly fewer parking spaces than were contemplated beforehand. I'd need to take a look at the schematic that was provided, but I think they have about 8 more parking spaces than the minimum the zoning bylaw requires.
Okay, perfect. The only other question I had was with regard to the west elevation, which is the elevation that would face Lombard Street, and I note that there are no windows. And I wondered if there was any opportunity to have windows similar to what Dollarama has right now, where they're not actually, oh, Wendy's pointing her finger. Did this come up?
They did.
Okay.
It came up, asked, answered. Those questions were asked. Those questions were asked and answered at the Planning Advisory, and there was some discussion with the Otis property, and this is what we're left with.
No windows?
No, on the street face side.
Right.
Right.
What was the rationale for no windows?
So I can speak to that. Certainly that was the visual layout of the Lombard Street facade was certainly an issue that we identified right off the bat, and certainly we're not, we wanted to avoid the appearance of a wall, and we conveyed to them that was our recommendation, that we improve the architectural features. They came back with with some of the brick designs. It's not substantial, but it's better than what was there before. And at the end of the day, we don't have a trigger within our within our planning documents that that mandates that. I do actually, I don't mean to put him on the spot, but a gentleman representing the builder is here. So if he can, with the permission of the chair, if he could speak to that a little more, since I was liaising with him and the Otises.
Sorry. Oh, Councillor Alfred has a point.
I think I can help answer, because that was one of our,
Yeah.
like, would look nice with the window, but when we discussed that further and information that was brought to us is that with a window there, if it is a retail center, it takes away floor space, it takes away opportunity to put stuff on the walls if you have a window. That was one of the one that I recall, that when we discussed it, that it takes away, because it's not designed or there's no plan to put a restaurant or something at that end of the 5 places, and it hampers or takes away retail space.
Right. So, I mean, I certainly hear that argument. It comes up a lot. However, the windows, and I use air quotes to describe them, the windows on Dollarama of the last 2 bays are actually in the back room. So there are ways that you can false out windows where the frames are installed, but you actually do have a wall that you could hang merchandise on behind it. So it gives the presence of having windows on the street without actually chewing up your square footage. So I would still lobby for windows anywhere that a building fronts on the street, and I understand that the planning policy behind it doesn't have the you shall provide windows on the streetscape, but as a practice I would like to think that council would aim higher on urban design contributing to streetscape, and Carl, I would think that, you know, we'll make do with this proposal at this point, but don't be afraid to push the envelope to something that creates better design in the end, because I think you'll have support from council. Okay, so Carl is seeking direction on two pieces, one to pass a bylaw for the amending agreement, and two to provide him with direction for the red line amendment to be done by staff. Deputy Clerk Bennett, does that need to be done by resolution?
Bylaw tonight.
Both bylaws tonight.
Just one bylaw, correct?
Yes, so one bylaw for the site plan, for the site plan amending agreement, and then I'm seeking direction from council to accommodate the elevation drawings for the restaurant through a red line revision process
Right. So
at a later date.
do we need the resolution to recognize the staff direction for the red line? Yes, I'm seeing a nodding head from CAO Morris. Okay, so will the resolution be coming forward tonight as well, or that'll come forward next week?
That'll come forward next week.
All right, next week it is. Thank you. Thank you, Carl.
Sorry, can you just confirm you had noted a bylaw for tonight, but if you need a resolution as well, we have to confirm that.
Just to confirm, so the bylaw for the amending agreement would be tonight, and the resolution would be for what would the resolution be?
The resolution will be for staff direction to undertake a red line amendment for the acceptance of your elevations for the freestanding
Great.
Starbucks space.
We'll do both
Great.
tonight.
Yes.
Okay, moving on, we have a report from Deputy Clerk Bennett regarding 2018 Statement of Remuneration and Expense Report.
Good evening. In compliance with Section 284(1) of the Municipal Act, I present to you the 2018 Statement of Remuneration and Expenses that has been prepared. You'll note in the report that the statement details remuneration and expenses paid to council members and committee and board members for the year 2018. This includes the council members from the term 2014 to 2018, as well as the current council 2018 to 22. The report details remuneration paid to members and expenses incurred in 2018. Items such as travel costs to attend workshops and conferences on behalf of the municipality are included. The report also details all figures provided to council representatives for committees and boards outside of the corporation. And you'll note that there's some denoted there for the health unit as well as the RVCA. So I bring this forward to you. This is an annual report that's brought forward, and a resolution needs to be passed, and it's posted to our website for public viewing.
Perfect, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Deputy Clerk Bennett. That'll come forward at our next council meeting to be received. Moving on, we have a staff report by Director Manhire respecting docks on ice. I assume it's docks on ice?
It is, thank you. Yes.
Dos?
So as council is aware, we had a delegation come to council asking for support for the Doctors on Ice tournament coming to the Ottawa Valley. The tournament is going to be held March 27th to March 30th, so the end of this month, in various locations in the Ottawa Valley. So they have booking, ice booking in Beckwith and Carleton Place and Perth and Kemptville, a number of different areas. But there will be a fair amount of traffic throughout the town. There's some background information. I'll just kind of highlight what that is. Initially, the tournament had actually booked 69 hours of ice valued at about $13,363. They have since reduced that to 47 hours of ice valued at about $9,000. Tournament organizers have also decided to move their gala to Perth rather than having that in Smiths Falls. So, in consultation, looking at the overall benefits, I've listed what that is here. And if council has any other questions around that support, then certainly I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Director Manhire. Questions? Councillor Alford?
This looks markedly different than when the doctors were actually here, in that the gal is not here and there's quite a bit less ice. Was there any reason given as to why they made those decisions?
Just refining the process.
Their plan, their original plan.
Frankly, from our perspective, we had actually met with them as well as somebody else trying to organize a tournament. We went with the doctors on ice because they initially had booked more ice time. So we've lost out on another tournament and lost about $4,000 in revenue as well. So.
That's an unfortunate story. Any other comments or questions?
Not to say this isn't a great event, and people will have fun, and certainly people will have the opportunity to come to town and visit the area. It's just the part of the challenge here that council can discuss is the idea that it's wonderful that they're doing this for charity. There's a lot of different charitable events that happen in town. We do, through community grants and through some in-kind support, support a number of them, but we just don't have the capacity to support all of them, even though they're all wonderful events and run by wonderful people. It's just what our capacity is to actually handle that.
Okay, so sorry, Councillor Alford, did you have a question? No, okay. The staff recommendation at this point is to provide a letter of support welcoming the doctors on ice, but not reduce the ice fees at all. I see nodding heads for that, so you have your direction.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on, our final report is with Director Manhire as well. It's respecting the pedestrian bridge recommended changes, and this is further to the report that we received 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
That's correct, February 25th.
Thank you.
So on February 25th, Council awarded the contract for the bridge design. It was based on the initial submission from an RFP process. And just have a correction in my report. It's MADI, M-A-A-D-I, as opposed to M-A-D-D-I, manufacturing. And there were some design, not issues with the bridge, but some things that we saw that would make it more efficient and safer and more appealing to the eye, and those are the components in the report. So the three pieces that were there, two of them, the rail design, the initial RFP brought back a rail design that had horizontal rails, which basically makes it a ladder that people can walk up on the rail system, and we felt that a vertical design would be safer with the proper spacing. We also had a deck design that was perforated aluminum, and they have an option for a high density wood deck that is very weather resistant and rot resistant, has a 20-year lifespan, and is, from staff's perspective, more visually appealing. The third component is one that was actually included as an option in the original bid, but was not included in their overall pricing, and that is for LED lighting built into the rail system to go across both bridges. Where we have power out to Turtle Island and Duck Island, we can hook it up right there fairly easily, and would add a nice feature of having the bridges lit that you could not only see from being on the bridge as well as being in the park, but also from Abbott Street as you're driving by.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Does council have any questions or comments? Councillor Alfred.
When you say the wood, is this a composite?
No, it's actually a high density wood that is used quite extensively in this kind of application.
And is it possible to add the lighting at a later time, or must it be done when the rails are
It's actually, we could add different lighting, but this lighting is actually built into the structure.
into the rails?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McGuire.
Thank you. For the lighting, where is it installed on the railing, or is it installed on the floor?
It's actually installed along the rail side. I have the report, and I'm sorry, I didn't, kind of anticipated that question, but didn't. In the preliminary report, I'm sorry that there's not a visual up here, but it's actually along the rail system under here. So it would be built into that rail system.
And is there any opportunity to power it with solar panels to save the $500 annual cost?
Haven't explored that, but there is, I'm sure, potential for that.
I think I definitely support the change in the railing design. I know as somebody who swims a lot down there, the kids are jumping off the small bridge a lot as it is, and it's not the safest situation. So I think if we can make it more safe, especially when there's higher flows going through that other side, it's definitely a diligent decision. The lighting, I think it'd be interesting to see if there was a cost for a solar option. Knowing the power pull of an LED system, it might be feasible, it might not. But that $500 a year would definitely add up quick.
Thank you, Councillor McGuire. Councillor McKenna.
As you know, we liked the design earlier. The lighting is the most interesting piece for me right now. Not that safety isn't critical, but the lighting, which is a safety feature as well. You mentioned, and that was my interest, I know when we talked about the official plan at our strategic plan at our meeting the other night, the public meeting, there was a conversation, but ideas flow, like we could light up a lot more things, and ridges are quite stunning and quite beautiful features when they are lit up properly. So you've answered it, but I'm not sure how I can see it from Abbott Street when the lighting is probably below the railing gearing down. It's designed to show it off from a distance as well?
Yes.
Okay. That's really important. And can the colors change on the light?
That's a good question.
Okay.
I don't know that, but I suspect that LED lights are not as changeable as others. Having said that, we do have a plan for introducing that into the fountains.
Okay, thank you.
Just a follow-up question to Councillor McKenna. I was under the impression it was direction-oriented lighting for walking. Am I to understand that it would actually project light outwards?
From what I've seen of the design, it is directional down, but it does provide a glow to the area, so you would be able to see the rail, the handrail, and kind of 3-4 feet around it. So it would definitely be visible from Abbott Street as you're driving by.
Okay. I want to be cognizant of the fact that there are residential uses around there, and I don't want it to look like Vegas. I mean, I love Vegas, but I don't want Vegas in a residential neighborhood. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Mayor Pankow?
Just again, the lighting, is it on both sides of the railing then? Lighting both the pedestrian crossing and the outsides of the bridge, is that?
It's right underneath the lip of the rail.
But on the inside
So
of the
there's a
outside,
light system on both sides of the bridge on the outside.
on the outside.
So we go down, it would show the footing on the deck itself as well as the rail system.
Okay.
Any other questions?
A lot of money for lighting, but. And the alternative, like if we did a light within the bridge, if we were to put up decorative lighting at each end of the bridge or even along the bridge, was there any costing for that?
We didn't cost that as part of this project, but it's not necessary to cost it. If council chooses to go with alternative lighting, then certainly that's something that we're considering for a number of different areas. Our parks, we're looking at going to a photoluminescent piece where we're lighting it either through solar panels or photoluminescence for all of the trails as well. We're looking at the same thing for for the stairs going up to Beckwith Street. So there are certainly other options that could be introduced after the fact, and if council chooses not to go with it at this point, it's not out of the realm. It's just not going to be, we couldn't retrofit it after the fact to go under the rails.
I mean, there'd be lighting options. The question would be, what would 36,000 buy us in other forms of lighting, or are we looking, would it be potentially a cost savings to have other forms of lighting? So that's where, I guess, where I'm caught is it that 36 a good use, or are we better off to just not spend the 36 and do something different with it after? And that's, from a time frame standpoint.
It's, just to be clear, it's 27 for the lighting component, and the other 83 or whatever it is 85 is the decking and the rails.
Okay, that's right.
Councillor McGuire?
Similar to Mayor Panko, it's the cost that kind of holds me back, and without being able to picture, whether it's that elegant, well-lit bridge I'm picturing in my head from Abbott Street versus, just more the path, it's hard to justify the cost. I'm wondering, out of the 8,500, how much goes to the decking and how much is the rail improvements?
They didn't break that component out. They did it by structure.
Okay.
So one structure went to 103 and the other one was at 86. So the difference between the two of them.
So to get the vertical rail improvements, we need to change the decking too for the structural.
It's part of the same quote. If council would like me to go back to the contractor again, I guess my concern overall is the longer we wait, the longer we wait.
How time sensitive is it to get it done by the end of the summer?
By the end of the summer? It's not at all. Our production time from them is 12 weeks, production and delivery. So at this point, we were hoping to get it for at some point in June, but.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Alfred?
And I think I'm picturing not just that pedestrian bridge, but other places where we want to use the lighting, and I'm thinking, wouldn't we want that to be consistent throughout the whole of downtown, all our pedestrian spaces? So I'm not probably in favor of going ahead with the lighting right now until we get a greater plan for lighting.
Yeah, there are other options for lighting that can be added after the fact. We just wouldn't have this exact lighting under the rail system. Doesn't mean we can't have standards or whatever else we have in the parks.
Okay. My sentiment is actually a preference for option 4, which is to proceed with the design as originally awarded. I respect the sentiment that moving from horizontal slats to vertical slats will discourage people from jumping off the bridge. I'm a big believer that's going to happen anyways, regardless of the railing type. The decking, I could take it or leave it. I don't know if one is going to be more durable than the other, aluminum versus this composite wood or high density wood. And the lighting, I would rather look at a comprehensive solution. Anybody want to weigh in on not proceeding with the change order? Councillor McKenna?
I think the safety feature of changing the railing, as Councillor McGuire, if we had that option and we ignored it, and later on down the road, did we do our due diligence? And I think I'd prefer to err on the side of caution and change the railing design. And the lighting, I like the idea of a comprehensive approach to that, and the decking I'm neutral on. So.
Mayor Panko?
Yeah, I support the change to the decking. I would prefer we wait on the lighting and we proceed with the option 1 design change.
Sorry, option 1 design change includes the lighting and... So option 2? The authorize only the decking and rail improvements with the cost being in the realm of $8,500. Okay.
Sorry, the change of the decking and the rail improvements, yes.
Okay, so maybe I'll just do a show of hands. Everybody in favor of option 2? All right, there we go. That's your direction. We'll proceed forward. This comes forward next week? Yes, okay.
Just as an information piece, there are waterfront lighting guidelines in the downtown and waterfront master plan from 2013.
Councillor Alfred?
Unrelated, but as long as you're standing there, is there an opportunity to get the lights at the fountains? Is that going to happen this summer?
Through the chair, we have a plan for that at this point.
Thank you. I won't ask you to go any further.
Okay, I didn't bring it. So. But the option does include the ability to change out lighting colors and things for events. And
Perfect. Thank you. All right, we have no standing items, so I will call for adjournment. Councillor Alfred and Councillor Allen, all in favor? Adjourned.
Good evening. Welcome to this regular meeting of Smiths Falls Town Council, special meeting of Smiths Falls Town Council for Monday, March 11th. We have regrets this evening from Councillor Brennan. I have no announcements. I'll ask for disclosure of monetary interest. I hear none. No delegations, no adoption of minutes, and no reports this evening. And we have one bylaw that is with Councillor Dwyer, please.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McGuire, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a site plan control agreement with Otis Properties Limited respecting the property known municipally as 123 Lombard Street, be received and read a first time and taken and read a second time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dwyer, second by Councillor McGuire. Bylaw 10014-2019, the bylaw to authorize execution of a site plan control agreement with Otis Properties Limited respecting the property municipally known as 123 Lombard Street, be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time. All in favor? Carried. Discussion, Councillor Dwyer?
Thank you. This application was subject to an amending agreement to a site plan control agreement that was originally authorized in 2006. If I have that date correct, Councillor Alfred. This represents the final phase of the development, which will see the finalized landscaping of this site. This is the home of the LCBO and the Dollarama. It will add new commercial square footage attached to the existing building, as well as a freestanding restaurant at the corner where the driveway connects with Lombard Street. So we are excited for this development, and it is proposed to commence this spring.
Further discussion? Third reading, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McGuire, that a bylaw to authorize execution of a site plan control agreement with Otis Properties Limited respecting the property known as 123 Lombard Street be read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10014-2019.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dwyer, second by Councillor McGuire. Bylaw 10014-2019. The bylaw to authorize execution of a site plan control agreement with Otis Properties Limited respecting the property municipally known as 123 Lombard Street, being now for the third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10014-2019. All in favor? Carried. And we have one miscellaneous motion, one resolution with Councillor McKenna, please.
Yes, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Allen. A red line revision. This relates to the Otis plan we just discussed. A red line revision site plan agreement with Otis Properties Limited. That the council, the corporation of the town of Smiths Falls, direct staff to undertake a red line revision to the approved amended site plan with Otis Properties Limited upon submission of the restaurant elevation.
Thank you. Discussion, Councillor McKenna?
This is yes, this is it's consistent with the plan we've just agreed to. The final design of the restaurant building on that site, we're just not quite sure on the elevation, and this will be finalized through our planning department and at a later date.
Thank you. Any further discussion? No, it's moved by Councillor McKenna, second by Councillor Allen. Red line revision, site plan agreement with Otis Properties Limited. The Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smiths Falls directs staff to undertake a red line revision to the approved amended site plan with Otis Properties Limited upon submission of the restaurant elevation. All in favor? Carried. Inquiries or announcements? Councillor McKenna, you had something to add tonight?
Just a couple of brief announcements. As you know, I'm Council's representative on the health unit, the Lanark-Leeds-Grenville Health Unit, and they've adopted a model of where they're going to they have assigned a public health nurse to every municipality as our liaison. And I think this will, we could work much more closely with our local health unit. And Caitlin Patterson is our local health unit nurse who will be responsible for Smiths Falls. And so I look forward, and I'm sure as staff and council does, in seeing how we can strengthen our relationship with public health to improve the overall health and well-being of our community. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. And if I may, there's a second one. I'm really want to congratulate Lanark County Interval House on their 40th anniversary. They've done a tremendous job over the last 40 years in protecting women and children against violence. There will be at County Community Services Committee on Wednesday night, there'll be an acknowledgement of Lanark County Interval House. And there's some events planned, so I encourage you to look at their website. And just, if I may, they do offer advice for all of us as we think about violence against women, that we challenge others to do their part. Visit the Women's Monument or the new art exhibition, that installation regarding this. Remember the names of the women. There are women from Smiths Falls who've lost their lives because of violence over the number of decades, and we have to remember that. And please ensure that violence against women remains on our agenda as we go forward. So again, just to congratulate the women of Lanark County in their efforts over the last 40 years to end violence against women.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Allen, you have something to add to?
I feel kind of that my announcement is rather flip after Councillor McKenna's, but Station Theatre a few years ago it was around the time we lost our own theatre in Smiths Falls. They started getting the idea, or running with the idea, of having movies, high-quality movies, once a month. They've been doing that, and so this weekend, Friday and Saturday evening, they're having A Star is Born. And if you weren't watching the Academy Awards, then I will tell you that it's a movie worth seeing. And it's $10. I mean, where can you go? Anywhere. And you can have a snack after. You can't have a snack there, but you can go out for dinner and then to a movie. And if we use that program, they'll keep it. And so that's why I usually try to just give you a heads up about it. It's just once a month, but it's 2 nights, Friday and Saturday, once a month. And they do get very high quality movies. So just an announcement.
Great. Thank you. Anything further? Motion for adjournment is with Councillor McGuire, please.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dwyer that this council adjourn its proceedings at 6:57 p.m. and stand so adjourned until the next duly called meeting of council.
Thank you. It's moved by Councillor McGuire, seconded by Councillor Dwyer. Adjournment. This council adjourns proceedings at 6:57 p.m. and stands so adjourned to the next duly called meeting of council. All in favor? We're adjourned.